What's going on, guys? It's been a while, but welcome back to Vaughn Coleman Presents. I am, of course, your host, Vaughn Coleman. And before we get into who I'm presenting, I wanted to, of course, shill myself, as I always do on this channel. Ladies and gentlemen, check out, feast your eyes on Phenomenova. So actually, it's been so long that last time I was promoting this book, it had a different title, but still same great story. It's, of course, what I'm hoping will be a phenomenon. We can always dream, right? And so basically what this story is, it's a 64-page first issue. I went to do a giant-sized first issue. It's set 20 years after World War III and follows this teenage boy who was struck by lightning while holding a mysterious crystal. And he finds himself awakening with electricity powers and super speed. And he wants to be like the brave heroes that fought in the war before them. And you can get a glimpse of them here. I'd love to do a prequel series about them, and I will. I plan on it. But first things first, we got to tell this story. So if that sounds interesting, definitely check it out. When you sign up, you will get an exclusive free trading card by a friend of the channel, Jules, aka Juju. So make sure to sign up. Get that trading card. I'm planning on launching, I think in April is when I'm going to launch. So absolutely check that out. And without further ado, let's bring in our man of the hour, Pete Simeti. How you doing, Pete?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure already. I loved coming on your show. I loved it was just straight to the geek talk and just talking about the art form. And one of the things I really like right off the bat about the company you run is it's so different from like every other company on the market right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I'd like to know how you view us in a different capacity. What do you think that we're doing differently?
Well, for starters, the newsprint is something I don't see a lot of. I'm not saying I've never seen it. Um, I noticed that you do the crowdfunding stuff while also still having your own website and publishing like other stuff. Like I think Johnny Phantasm even to start off with was under Alterna, right? Or
No, no.
no,
So
it
okay,
wasn't.
we had a printing partnership program for I don't maybe 2 years. It was years ago though. We haven't had that for about 3 years or so. Um, so a lot of different people were able to jump on board when we had a newsprint printer that was able to make it affordable enough to do so. But then when the pandemic hit, it made supply chains really unpredictable, and the cost of printing kept going up and up and up. So with that happening too, we had to leave a newsprint printer. I think at the end of 2019 or early 2020, something like that, and we ended up going to a different printer, which we currently have now, and they're great. But the thing is that their run size for a minimum is not the same as what the other run was at the previous printer. So it just didn't make the printing partnership something that was able to be done and something affordable for people to do really anymore. I still get probably once a week somebody asking about it, but we haven't done that in about 3 or so years. But yeah, so that's what that happened with that book and many others too. I think we put maybe 20 or 25 books. We helped them get printing in those 2 years. But I wish we could do it, but it's too many variables even still, yeah, we just can't.
I understand that. I mean, it already sounds like a lot, just doing that. I mean, I can't even imagine how much work that is. I mean, publishing your own stuff is already tough enough, but I mean, you've been doing it for so long. I mean, did you ever? Well, okay, I guess before I get into the business side, I guess even though we already started, I want to take a step back because I always like to know how people got started, even just as a fan. Like, what got you into comics and just creating in general?
Yeah, so man, I've always been into comics for as long as I can remember. I can't remember a time in my life when I wasn't into comics. And comics were always around in one shape or the other because I had cousins that got them. I had a mom that kind of worked near a convenience store that she would get them. So I still have a bunch of dog-eared, no cover on them kind of comics. I love to death. But I guess I started wanting to making them around when I was 12 or so, in terms of a professional kind of capacity. And I'm probably thinking like, hey, 12 years old, what the hell do you know about anything? And yeah, I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew what I wanted to do. Making my own comics and my own stories and coming up with characters. And I didn't want to ever like work on a character like a Spider-Man or a Wolverine or whatever it is, and give like my take on them. I didn't want to ever do anything like that. I wanted to create characters to exist with those characters when I was a kid. And so that kind of gave birth to me just making my own characters and my own stories. I never worked for another comic company or anything like that. I started my own company when I was 21, I want to say. This is our 18th
Wow.
year.
Wow. Congrats.
Thanks. And I mean, it was, I say company, and it wasn't really much of anything. It was just us like getting it incorporated, and me kind of running things as a self-publishing label for a while and putting out my really bad comics. I did 2 issues of a really bad series where I learned a lot. I learned what I liked doing, what I didn't like doing, and I worked for free on a bunch of other projects for people. Not working for exposure, because you never want to work for exposure when you don't know what you're doing. You want to work for experience. Everyone's always talking about that whole, don't work for free, don't work for free. Well, the thing is that you have to learn,
Hmm.
so you're either going to pay for that education, or you can pay for that education by working with people who are kind enough to allow you to ruin what they're creating, more or less. And you learn, and you ask questions, and you figure out what to do, and you kind of grow like that. So I did that for about a year or two, and then started making my own comics. And then by that point in time, I started noticing that people were thinking that it was a bigger company than it was, sending me submissions, and people that were very talented, far more talented than I was. And they all had the same kind of story where they just didn't have an in, they didn't know what to do, they didn't know how to make any kind of way within the industry. So I figured, well, if we start small, we do print on demand. We, just kind of do signings, local conventions, whatever it may be. No distribution, nothing like that at that point in time. No big giant print runs or whatever. That how bad could it be? We'll learn, we'll grow, and maybe in a couple of years or whatever, we'll be in a different spot. And a couple of years we were. It took about 2 years, and then we got distribution. And so then we went with Diamond and another a book distributor at that point by the name of Partners Publishers Group. And we had books going to the book market, and we had graphic novels going to Diamond. And the reason that we did graphic novels instead of single issues at the time was because the work schedule for most indie creators, especially the ones that were at Alterna, they had a day job, they had other responsibilities, so they could only really stick to maybe one graphic novel a year or something like that. It was easier to kind of get away with one graphic novel a year than it was to do one single issue a year, you know. And I think readers didn't mind that either. So we had maybe about a dozen or so creators for that first year or two, and put out a book like once a month, a new book, and in the lineup. That's how it was. So we had something always getting released, even though the same creators weren't putting things out consistently. Alterna was. And we did that for about 10 or so years. Over the course of that time, we had a bunch of ups and downs. One of the ups in particular that I still don't know how that happened was we had a New York Times bestseller in
Oh, wow.
2012. We none of us know how it happened. The distributor doesn't know how it happened. The people who made the book don't know how it happened. It's called Fubar Volume 2 Empire of the Rising Dead. And
Volume
that's a
two is what really took off.
yeah, and that was like a zombie World War II anthology series.
Wow.
And so it was a good book, but I think it got to like number 6 or something on the New York Times bestsellers list. And that was fun. That was a nice accomplishment. We've had a couple of different fun things occur throughout the time of publishing the graphic novel type lineup. But 2017 was when we experienced a whole other level of an explosion of sorts with the newsprint line. Most people at that point in time, to show you the difference, we were already around for 10 or 11 years by 2017. The newsprint line, we had so many people thinking we were a brand new company because we didn't really do the single issue thing, and we were coming on the scene with these newsprint comics. They weren't aware, for the most part, of the New York Times bestseller, a movie that was made that was adapted, the multiple printings of graphic novels and whatnot, because the fanfare for that kind of stuff was not the same level that it was for single issues and the direct market. So the newsprint single issues being priced at that point in time at $1.50, they're $2.25 now. That was tremendous for us, but it also started getting us a lot of enemies within the industry. They didn't really generally like what we were doing in terms of the price point and putting comics on newsprint again, something that was both of those things that were being told to customers could not happen. And that was being told for decades. And we were doing it, and we still do it. But at this point in time, we're now self-distributing and selling direct, and we've left the distribution market back in 2020.
Oh,
We
you're
don't
completely
distribute.
done with it?
Yeah, completely done. We don't distribute to any of them anymore. Left the book distributor, left the digital distributors, left Diamond. We're 100% direct to reader and retailer at this point.
Oh, wow. So what made you decide on that decision? Because that's a huge thing.
In a way, the decision was kind of decided for us. And the reason why I say that is because the book market, now we were on newsstand as well for 2 years. And newsstand was a fun way to advertise the book, but not really to get sales. Full returnability, no accountability. And now it's particularly interesting because the return process, especially, or at least I should say, with the people that we went with, they would sell them to like Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, places like that, and they would just need to scan the barcode on the cover. They wouldn't need to like rip off and have like proof of life on the covers or anything anymore, the way they used to. So they could just scan the barcodes. So what would happen is I would get all these reports month after month, and eventually around like the 6th or 7th month of a title, I'd start to see returns into the negative numbers. And that means that essentially they're scanning in more returns than what they even received. So if you sent like 3,000 copies and you're seeing 3,021 get scanned in, and you lose that. And I talked to the distributor and I was like, there's something obviously happening that's very strange here because we should not be getting returns in the negative than what we've sent out on a physical product. And we left that newsstand distribution after 2 years, and that was a very colorful exit for us. They never responded back. Took 2 months, and I said, you know what? I'm not sending anything in anymore. How about that? So we had left them at that point. But what happened was, as far as why we sell direct now, in particular, the graphic novel market got really strange, which is why we went to doing newsprint single issues to begin with. Started getting really flooded. Every single publisher was putting out graphic novels and trades for every damn thing, when they really shouldn't have been doing that. The whole writing for the trade, selling for the trade, that kind of a thing, it really kind of skewed the whole market in a weird way. Not everything deserves to be compiled and put in a trade or made into a graphic novel or whatever it might have been. So the market was getting really flooded. The turnaround time in that market, again, returnability in that market, was usually around 6 to 12 months. So it's half a year to a year. I started noticing the turnaround factor being 1 to 2 months. So it was being treated like it was a single issue comic. So a graphic novel that used to have time to sit there, you had time to market it. You went through various cycles within the year of selling it. You didn't have that time anymore. So I said, what's the point of doing this? We might as well just do single issues if we're going to treat it like these graphic novels, which were way more expensive, like 3 times the cost. If they're going to be treated like single issues at the book market, and most of our book sales were coming through Amazon too, send hundreds of books to Barnes & Nobles, it didn't really seem to matter. 99% of them or so would get returned and usually just destroyed. Damaged beyond selling again, because they would just throw them in a box and then ship them back, and between people looking at them and then the store is not displaying them properly and the shipping process, those books would get chucked. Eventually, I had to talk to the distributor and say, "Could you stop throwing them away and maybe just send us the damaged books? We'll figure out something to do with them." But so that's one aspect of us. We started leaving them, and we started selling graphic novels directly, and then eventually cut that line. The single issues, when we started selling those directly, what happened was that we were getting a lot of orders coming into Diamond, which was great, but they weren't really honoring them on the reorder level. So with Diamond, you have to wait for them to send you a purchase order. If you send your product, even though you can see the orders coming in, if you send them product, let's say you see 500 reorders piled up. If you send that out and you're proactive about it, thinking you're doing a good job, what they're going to do is they're going to throw the books away. At the point in time, this is what they did for us. They did it one time and I stopped doing it. Threw the books away and then fined us $150.
Wow.
So I said, well, we're not doing that again. They said, yeah, you can't send anything to us. We got to send you a purchase order. I said, all right. And I said, well, how long does it take to get a purchase order? They said, well, 2 weeks usually. They hit a threshold and then we send them out. I said, what's the threshold? They said, well, all your titles seem to have a threshold of 10. I said, okay, all right. So I listened to them. They said 10. When a certain comic got to 10, they would send out a purchase order. We would ship them the comic. I would notice that hundreds of orders would come through and then get auto-canceled after a month. And we didn't get any of those. So after that happening twice, losing at that point in time, I think about 700 or 800 orders, started selling direct. And we opened up like an Etsy store. We didn't really sell direct on our site at that point. So we started selling on Etsy because people would go to eBay and sell these books and that's fine that they did that, but they're selling the books for like maybe $7 or $8 a piece, $1.50 book, when we overprint so we can sell to the retailer, the reorders. So I'm sitting on, hundreds upon hundreds of books in the overprint that we could sell to the store instead of having someone go to eBay. But we weren't getting those purchase orders, so we couldn't ship them to the distributor. So people started then buying from us directly. And eventually, over time, we left Etsy. We did our own thing on our own site because the sales warranted it to not be on that site anymore. And then we started eventually outselling direct what we were selling through Diamond. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were in a better position, I guess, than we would have been to start selling direct, because there was going to be a time where they said that we weren't going to get a payment for 8 to 10 months. And I fought for about 2 or 3 months for us to get our payments and to get that squared away. But there were still publishers that I know they were waiting during that course of time to get anything. And we were still selling direct. So we were doing the crowdfunding, we were selling on our site, and it was fine. It was okay. But so at that point in time, we had a lot of different problems with Diamond over the years, but they were still better than Newsstand and the book market, which is funny. There's a couple of really great people that I worked with at Diamond over the years, but there was a couple different policies within working with them as a distributor. Like I said, especially the whole thing with the reorders, and that was a nightmare scenario. In total, I think we lost like 15,000 or so reorders over the 3 years of between 2017 to 2020 working with them with the single issues. So to lose like 15,000 that would have went to the comic shop, that would have given them sales, that would have possibly helped us to expand within that market, it just seemed like there's no upside to being here, because it was like doing 3 times the work to earn 1/3 of the money. Very, very different, a very cold process too. Everything's like you're at an arm's length from the retailer, from the customer. You're at a double arm's length. Like you're not even really supposed to sell direct to the customer. You're supposed to want them to go to the store and then they talk to the retailer, and and we'll still have that to this day of people saying when they want to have their store order direct from us, that they try to get their store to do that, but their store doesn't want to. And then it leaves all of us confused. But when we were with Diamond, it was even more confusing, and we got a lot of different stories like that. And I even had that experience when I went into a store on my own one time, just to be like, "Oh, would you get Alterna in the store?" And and they're like, "Oh, I thought they closed down." And I'm like, "They didn't close down." I'm like, "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, I thought I heard it somewhere." And I was like, Well, that'd be news to me because I run the company.
That's nuts. So they
I've never seen a redder face in my life. I ended up selling books to the guy directly, the retailer, but it was an interesting conversation.
that
It's
is
like it's
nuts.
yeah, it's like being told you're dead when you're standing right in front of him.
Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, hearing all of that because I'm one of those things where I think you are. I remember even like I responded to something with you. You were because you I love the advice you give on like Twitter, where it's like you really don't need to focus on saving the comic industry at first. You just need to make a comic because I always do this. I'm like, we got to get out to the markets, whatever, and all that. And I'm like, okay, uh do you have a completed book? It's like you got to figure that out. And it's, I mean, I even talking to distributors, you realize it's easier said than done because yeah, it's a great idea. I think even you would agree the novelty of having your books on newsstands and everything, but the business side, it's just tough.
Yeah, and something that we noticed in particular was a lot of the bigger publishers were not on newsstand anymore. At that point in time, Marvel was getting out of it, and DC was slowly phasing away. I think Archie's the only one that still continues to fight the good fight, and they do it in a smart way. So they still have success there. But if the bigger publishers, let's say they all put, I don't know, their top five, let's say top five best-selling titles on there, and they left them there, it'd be a lot easier for every independent to grow within that market, put maybe your top one or top two. But because of the fact that that's not really something that occurs anymore, and the big two kind of did newsstands dirty when they left very abruptly, to the point that I talked to several distributors that remember it as if it was yesterday about them in the 90s turning their back on them. They were like, oh, comic books, huh? Like that kind of tone. And they also don't have a lot of market data to show that it's justified to have the comics. So they look at magazine sales and things like that. And magazine sales are a whole different animal because those are very timely. Whereas comics, at least should, lean more on the side of being an evergreen product
Right,
that is
timeless.
more about story and things like that. Yeah. I know nowadays comics are seemingly, well, in the mainstream anyway, they kind of want to rush into that grave as well, along with the magazines and whatnot, and becoming more of a timely sort of thing.
And for a million reasons, I think so. Even down to variant covers, I think too. It's like, oh, you got to get in the shop and get it quick. And I think there's so
Yeah,
many reasons.
the it's a lost art now to really grow the story and do what's best for the characters and the story, and the reason that the issue's worth money is because something important happened in it,
Mhm.
as opposed to this kind of false sense of collectability with a lot of the stuff with the imposed scarcity of it, or the variant, or any other kind of gimmick used to boost sales in that capacity. It's a very it's an industry that's become really full of misdirection at this point, and it's a shame because it doesn't need to be that way. But for newsstand, that's what I really found when I was talking to a lot of different suppliers, stores, distributors, was that they did not have the fondest feeling for comics. Now, one of them that was interesting was we were in Toys R Us for the last 2 months before they had closed out. We were in there the holiday season, and they were actually really excited about it. The Toys
Wow.
R Us rep was like, "Wow, these are great! We could put all ages comics. We've been looking for great all ages comics. We could put it to register for a while now. It's been so difficult." And we still have customers to this day that discovered our comics at the register at Toys R Us. And if you're gonna put comics or anything in a store, that's like an ideal spot
That's a
because,
perfect spot.
yeah, if you put them somewhere else, the likelihood of people just even seeing it is minimized. But if you put it at the register, they'll at least see it, and that's
Yeah.
like 90% of the battle, is just to not be a strange and unusual, unheard of, unseen
Hmm.
product. Is for them to see it. Even the point of commercials and things like that. It's not so you buy it right then and there. It's so that you become aware of it. So now you have knowledge of what this thing does, and hopefully then when you go out in the store, or when you need a product that does without it, you think of that item. But it's the same thing with retail product placement at the register. That's the best spot, and it's worth every penny. But some people, they'll have a separate display somewhere else in the store, or they'll do other various things like that, and it's nice, and it'll look cool and whatever when you see it. But it's a lot of money to be paid for something that's not really going to do a whole hell of a lot at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's all again goes back to that easier said than done whole thing, because I think everyone would agree that, like I said, even just half the battle really is, because I put my heart and soul into what I'm writing, but getting people just to see it and just say, hey, this exists, is a tough thing. And even like when I was a kid, I was into superheroes. I didn't start reading comics until I was in 6th grade, because they just weren't, if they were readily in the stores, I think I would have gotten to them. But I also understand, especially kind of even in the limited capacity and hearing you talk now, why they're not in stores. I think if they're, it's like a double-sided thing. There's a reason why publishers
Yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah, and I can't say, after getting out of that space, I can't say that I blame them at this point, because the damage has been done. There's really no going back to it. It'd have to take an entire sea change at both the comic industry and at the retail level, and for that to occur, it's like almost asking the impossible. So at this point, it's better to try to find other avenues to sell. And there's so many people out there too that go, well, you have to have it in a physical store. If it's not in a physical store, it's never going to sell. But then meanwhile, one of the biggest, if not the biggest retailer on the planet is not a physical store. It's Amazon. So people are shopping online. Like anything else, it just depends. Well, where do you have it, and how can you access it so that you can let people know about it? Can people get to it easier? And that was one of the things that was really frustrating with the direct market, was because you would tell people to, you go to the comic shop, and then you tell them to go and pre-order, and you give them some funky code. I mean, the way that the comic pre-order system is, imagine doing anything else in your life that's like that. Imagine you go to the grocery store to pre-order your groceries, and you got to give them codes for all the groceries you want and put them on your grocery pull list. And that, instead of them just being there, you know. And if the only mandate that Diamond had, let's say, was every comic shop has to purchase at least one copy of the comic that's in previews, then you could go to every shop and say, and they could always purchase more. That's just the minimum is one, because they do have order minimums. But if it was a minimum of that, then every shop would have every comic, and if they didn't, it was sold out. So it would be, you could just tell everybody, go to your local comic shop. We're gonna have our comics there, and if it's not there, it's sold out. And that's a great deal. You could then market that if it's sold out. So then everyone makes even more money. And I know comic shops only have so much space, but at the same time, I've never been in a shop that seemed like it didn't have enough space that could have had enough space. It's
Yeah.
just they have to be properly organized. There's not that many new books out that you can't possibly have at least one copy of all of them in some capacity within the store, as long as the store is properly organized. Now, again, someone can go, well, what if Diamond decides they're going to carry like 4,000 comics and now we got to order all 4,000? Well, then that should be up to Diamond to then make sure that they're curating their selection, which they do. They do that. They have people that are looking through it going, okay, we think that'll do well, that won't do well, and say things like that, and then they'll judge and put their books within the previews catalog like that. But if we can't get comics into a comic shop, if it turns into, well, where the hell do the comics go?
Right.
So it turned into this whole aspect of, just like with online shopping, where people were getting like rain checks and couldn't find items and all these other things, which might be a thing before your time even. It's barely of my time, but it's probably before yours in terms of online shopping not being a thing. But that's what kind of gave rise to all of that, because people couldn't find stuff in the store. So they go, well, where the hell am I going to get this? So eventually they go to online shopping when that was an option. And then the same thing now is occurring within the comic sphere. You can't find it in the store, or the
You
thing
can
that
look it
you
up.
want isn't there. So you start going to the internet, and all of a sudden you start finding like, oh, wow, there's a ton of stuff being made, you know, and it's strange because sometimes it seems like the most difficult place on earth to get a comic book is at
Is
a
a comic
comic book
shop.
store.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think they're so dependent. And this is one of the things I think is just a general thing is people want the same stuff. They want that comfortability and they want instant gratification too, I think is another thing too. But I think even like, wait, to your point, there have been times where I have been like, oh, I can't find this book at the shop. So I'll go and you go online. And while you're there, you're like, to your point, you're like, oh, well, might as well while I'm here. Dude. It's kind of the same thing in the comic. There are times I've went to the comic shop. I'm just going to get this book. Oh, something else is there. I'll just get it. I think that's a good thing. I think the problem, there's some great sides, but also some bad sides to everything being its own publisher. The good side is, everyone has creative control, which leads to great products. The tough part is that everything gets so segmented.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the next phase, if this is to expand and go somewhere else, would there would need to kind of be at least one. At least one. It would help if there were more, but at least one online retailer in some
Mhm.
capacity, a reseller, retailer, whatever it is, that was kind of centralized, so you can get everybody's indie, crowdfunded, whatever books on this website once they were made and done, and then these people could sell at a discount and get these books to the site. And I think we'll probably see that in the next couple of years or whatever, if not sooner.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the next phase of this. It's also important to understand too, a lot of this stuff that's happening now with indie creators and everybody that's getting into this now. It's a very new thing, and a lot of the people that are doing this are not just comic creators. They're now entrepreneurs. They're now business people. They're now
Mhm.
trying to think of all these things that may seem like, if you've been doing it for a while, that it's obvious. But it's not obvious to them because they're up against these things for the first time. So there's logistics, there's all kinds of other stuff involved. When most of these people are making their own book or they're their own company, when the marketing side of it is up and running, the making the comic side is down. When so all your various hats that you wear when you're doing these jobs, the whole market shuts down. If you're doing one thing, the whole department is not working if this other department is working. And
Mhm.
that's something to understand and sort of try to acclimate yourself to when you're a creator or running this business that you're finally doing for the first time. And I think people get better and better at that, but it does take time. And unfortunately, I understand too. I get both sides of it. I get the side too of the customers going, man, I wish these books came out a lot faster. And man, I wish they did too.
Yeah, I did
I
too. I wish I would on. I remember I was finding a note that was just in a pile because I'm so disorganized from 2022 saying, "Oh, get issues 1 through 5 out this year." It's now 2024 and issue 1 isn't out, and I'm like,
yeah,
you know, but it's
so it's
sometimes
a different
everything takes
system.
too long, and because I'd always be like, well, how'd they get it out on I want to be like Marvel and get it out on a monthly deadline. Okay, well they had like PAs, they had an entire office staff, they had a million people in printers, they had consistent salaries, all that. Of course they could get it out on a monthly
Yeah,
schedule.
and you could do consistent salary and page rate and things like that when a company has more leverage in terms of the ownership of what's being made, and also more of a say. So
Mm-hmm.
if someone wanted to go creator owned, and let's say they want 100% creator ownership, well, then that means, and that's what we have at Alterna, but that means then that the publishing company, the publisher, whoever's involved and in charge, can't tell you how to make your story. So that means that essentially that they also have no skin in the game. So if you're 100% creator owned and your IP is yours, it's wonderful. But then there's a profit split afterwards. And the profit split is going to be towards the side of the creator as well. So then that leaves the company in and of itself only so much wiggle room to do something with. So now if the creator is like, well, how come, that you're going to have like a big marketing team and all this like fancy stuff to get out there and get the word out? Well, that's because we don't have the money to do that, because
Yeah.
it's all going towards keeping your ownership intact. Because
Yeah.
if I have, let's say, half of the ownership of a property, then that means that I'm able to leverage that and create merchandising deals or licensing deals or do whatever it is, approach toy companies, approach other, t-shirt manufacturers, all these kinds of different things you can get them going. Based off the back, though, of that property being popular. Now, for that property to become popular, there's a lot of different things that need to be done, and the biggest out of which is the marketing and getting the word out there. And that's a very time consuming and costly thing depending on how you're doing it. So when people are approaching the creator owned factor, and they want it to be 100% creator owned, you have to understand then with great ownership comes great responsibility. And
Oh,
that
I've
means that
learned that.
that means that you have to be the voice and face of your brand. If you want that publisher to care more about the book than you do, if you want someone else to be more excited about that book and thing that you're making than you are, that's going to be a really weird place to put yourself in. And I've tried to have that talk a lot with creators over the years, but most of them think like, oh, you just don't want to talk about the book. I'm like, I am talking about the book. What I'm saying is you need to talk about it more. People need to know that how much you care about these characters and stories that you're making. You're putting an awful lot of time, in some cases an awful lot of money, depending if you're working with a creative team. You should really care about this. If you don't really care to talk about it, you should be trying to almost like self-censor at every corner because you're so excited to talk about it, but you're like, I shouldn't spoil this, I shouldn't say that. You should be so excited about it, uh, as opposed to trying to play it coy or play it cool, and just go, oh, well, they'll discover everything once they read it. And I'm like, they don't even know about it. Why the hell are they going to read it? They have to be told about it, and they have to see that you're excited about it. Because if you're not, guess what? The next guy who is, even just incrementally more excited about their book than you, they're going to be more interested in that person. There's a lot of stuff to get into in entertainment. There's a lot of comics out there. So you have to really let people know how much you care about what it is that you're doing. And then maybe, hopefully, that enthusiasm will be infectious.
And that's one of the things that I've been told. I got to lean. I'm good at, but that I need to lean into more is the enthusiasm. I think every creative tells you that you can't lose that enthusiasm. You can't let it beat you down. I want to get into that, but Michael Dicha, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, said, "What distribution channel was Pete using when that book made the bestseller list?"
That was we were on Partners Publishers Group. It went through a they were a book distributor. They're not around anymore though. They were really nice people. But it just, the market at that point in time, shortly after, I'd say probably around 2014, 2015, they closed. And it was off the back of a lot of what I was talking about too. It wasn't just the graphic novel market, but a lot of stuff in the book market at that point. It was really difficult to get book sales going, and so they had shut down. But yeah, that was the company.
And it was which company?
Partners Publishers Group.
Partners Publishers Group. Would you? And you would never do that again, just because of the current state of the market.
Yeah, like a lot of different things would have to really change for me to want to go back into distribution. Because like I said, it really is like doing three times the work for a third of the money.
That's one of the things that because I'm so I mean I'm sure you get this, like you're just a wealth of knowledge because you took the hardest route, which is doing it on your own. It's that whole you can't get everything you want, which at first when I'm like, I'm idealistic, I'm like, yeah, I'll get creative, I'll do it for lower prices, and I'm like, okay, here's reality. And so I've made like every mistake. Well, probably not. There's definitely going to be more I'll make, but it makes you a better creator. And it's interesting hearing how many ebbs and flows in the market you've had to deal with, and you're still here. But I do have a question getting back to the beginning, because you mentioned, just because I always like to get a feel for this sort of thing. I love talking about the business, but I'm curious, what were some of your favorite comics to start with?
Oh man. Okay, so right off the bat, Chris Claremont X Men,
Oh, my
definitely up
man.
there.
That was
definitely
what
up there for
inspired
me.
me.
Um, I loved Spider Man when I was a kid. I loved anything with Batman. I loved Brave and the Bold, Detective Comics. And these were all like around like 70s and 80s. And the reason I say 70s, even though I was born in 84, is because I had older cousins and family members who would be giving me their comics.
Mhm.
So I got more acclimated to being exposed to that kind of stuff. A lot of like mid to late 70s comics, early 80s, and really falling in love with all of that because that was a lot of the time my first exposure to them. Like John Romita is my Spider-Man artist. Even though I wasn't around in the time of when Romita was drawing Spider-Man, because I had so many of these comics and these things that I saw that had John Romita art. And the same thing goes with X-Men, Claremont and Byrne, and it was more of a Marvel, I'd say, leaning, with the exception of some Superman and Batman. But when I did get into DC Comics, it was kind of like when I pictured DC, I picture Jose Luis Garcia
Oh
Lopez's
man,
art. You know,
he's
just
so
that
good.
classic, iconic interpretations, and the marketing and merchandising departments know
Was
what
all him.
works. Yeah, because they even still put that stuff out to this day
You
for
can't
both
top it.
sides. This classic, iconic interpretation of these characters that they know people love and are familiar with. Even though the comics might skew a different way, which is unfortunate. Maybe they should
Oh
have the
man.
merchandising departments going, hey, maybe give us a crack at it of art direction. Uh,
Seriously,
but yeah,
when I was first getting into comics, they were doing it was like the new 52 was I'd been like into the movies and I found on the animated series and all that and I was like, all right, now I want to take the leap into where all this came from, the comics. And what the new stuff that was coming out was basically deconstructing everything and I was like, well then I'll just read the old stuff. If you're just going to like why is Superman in jeans? Where's the spit curl? Why are you saying that we need to remove the underwear because it's goofy? It was charming. It was just part of the character. And it was really bizarre that they were almost like embarrassed of themselves when I was already a kid that was, let's put it this way, we all know comic book fans were never cool growing up and it was like on top of that the comics themselves were like embarrassed to be comics and it was a very bizarre time to be getting into.
yeah. I mean, the comic industry for a time was full of a cool factor, and then comics all of a sudden became I don't know, this inferiority complex. And it still kind of has an inferiority complex. It views
Oh yeah.
itself as sitting at the kiddie table instead of the cool kid table, and it thinks like, okay, well, if we get with the Hollywood cool kid table, then we'll be cool kids too. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
and it's unfortunate because what makes you cool, whether you're a company or you're a person, is not caring about such things. That's
Right.
what makes you cool. Not wanting to constantly be like, well, can I be cool now? Can I be? No, you just do your thing.
Yeah.
So if the comic companies just owned it and they were like, hey, we're making comics. These things are the greatest things in the world. Whether you think so or not, it's too bad, but they're great and you should get into them because they're awesome. That's what makes comics cool. So embracing that would have really helped comics grow away from that kind of, I mean, even at one point in time, I remember, I believe it was DC that had put like something that was like, they're not just for kids anymore. And,
They
just stuff like
haven't been
that.
for decades
They
too.
weren't all, yeah, exactly. They were for all ages.
Like
All
Dark Knight
kinds of people of
Returns, like
all ages read comic books.
it was really weird. Because you even look at some of the older Batman comics and they weren't. It was like trying too hard. And it was like I was just getting into comics and they were already rubbing me the wrong way. And I'm not I there was some great stuff in the new 52. I love Jeff Johns' Aquaman. I liked a lot of the art, but it was just a weird time to be getting into comics. And it seems like it's gotten weirder for new fans, and even for creators. I mean, it's even I was talking to people who have been in for years, and I'm like, "Do you have any advice for a new creator?" And like, man, I don't even know. The industry has changed so much. People, it's almost like don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and all of it kind of has an impact on every aspect of the industry. So it all has an impact on like that mindset. And it's like this again for an individual too. Once you have the mindset of you can or you can't, either
Yeah.
way you'll be right. You know what I mean? So if you think you can or you think you can, either way you'll be right. So once you start thinking, well, I'm a loser, I'm not going to do anything good, I need someone else to make me a winner, and blah blah blah. So yeah, you're gonna be that way. If you start thinking, yes, I can, we can do this, we could do that, we could do the other thing. We'll take our time, we'll understand it, we'll learn, we'll do the best we possibly can, and you keep going at it. Then yes, you'll achieve that as well. But you really have to give it your all and really believe and understand that that's a big part of that. If you don't have a belief within yourself or what you're doing, a genuine belief, you're not going to accomplish what you think you or hope to do. So the same thing occurs within the comic industry. If the comic industry is sitting there going, well, we're just not good enough, so we'll be good enough, I guess, when someone else says that we are, then that's how that's going to play out. And it's going to play out and have ramifications in every level. So the retail is going to play out that way. The distribution is going to play out that way. Eventually, the creators are going to play out that way. And you're going to attract that same mentality over and over again of like these people with like a weird inferiority complex, and not really like a winning kind of attitude. And they're going to end up losing multiple times, and you're going to continue to have losses over and over and over again because people can't shift their attitude. So once you have a shift in attitude across the board, then you can have a shift towards the side of winning. But it is easier said than done when you can only control what you do. So if you have a company that now all of a sudden is being invaded by people with an attitude that is not a winning attitude,
Hmm.
you might have a winning attitude, but maybe you don't make the shots. Maybe you can't call who's on here or who's on there. Maybe you can't do certain things. So now all of a sudden there's a lot of different aspects that are getting torn down by an attitude that is not going to be conducive towards winning. So you're going to have a lot of shrinkage. You're going to have a lot of contractual, the opposite growth. You're going to have a contracting in the business, and it's going to become smaller and smaller. So now we have what we have in the comic industry. By the time that when we joined Diamond in 2008, and then when we left in 2020, the amount of comic shops got cut in half. And then by the point of like, let's say, if I went back 10 years prior, it was twice the size of when we got into the industry. The industry keeps shrinking, and
Wow.
it's strange because there's a ton of people who would love to read comics. You see other aspects of the industry, manga, which is like right next door, and they're growing and they're kicking the butt of the comic industry for multiple reasons. And it's because of the fact that manga, for all intents and purposes, is largely running their business the way the comic industry ran it 30, 40 years ago. So there's a swagger there. They're telling stories that are interesting to people. They're putting story and character first. They're getting them in as many places as possible. Every single thing that you could have said what was going on 30, 40 years ago within the comic industry, manga is doing it. There's a synergy even with their other, with their books to with their films and their shows and their merchandise. Everything feels like it's connected and makes sense. So you can really have a full and complete pattern of growth. But with comics, it's so fractured, it's so disjointed, and it's unfortunate because it doesn't need to be that way. But it kind of has that trickle down effect. So now we're seeing, I think, an opposite of it because we're seeing kind of a breakaway with a lot of independents, and they're doing their own thing. It's going to take time and focus, but I think we can get there to start building something substantial. But again, it takes time and it takes
Takes time.
focus.
Oh, taking time is and focus. Those are things I'm learning like every day. But it's really interesting just seeing your company model set up, and I'm curious why. So when everyone was telling you not to do newsprint, because this is a thing I've debated is how I want to go about printing my comics, and I've had so many people give me so much feedback. Why did you decide on newsprint, and why have you stuck with it? And how do you use it to your advantage? How do you make it profitable?
It's kind of at first a purely selfish decision To me, comics and newsprint are synonymous. I hated comics when I was a kid when they went to glossy. I hated that. Struggling with the light, the garish colors, everything was just a pain in the butt. And I don't know if it made any sense at the time, but it sure felt like it did. It felt like the stories got worse when they went to glossy. Like it felt like it was more about how it looked, like
Mhm.
as a product, than about how it looked as a story and as a
Mhm.
character. And I don't know if it's just coincidence or it probably isn't, but that's what got drilled into my head. The best comics on earth, non newsprint. And so even looking, as soon as I started Alterna, I figured, oh, how crazy could it be to find a newsprint printer? And it was difficult, especially I wasn't looking in the right place. It's a whole different printer. It's not an offset printer. It's not a digital printer. Digital and offset, the machinery, it's not fine tuned enough to take newsprint. Newsprint will get destroyed within that machinery. You got to go for a web press, and what we do is we use a cold set web press. And cold set is different from heat set. Cold set allows you to take the silly putty and then you can get it on there. Heat set, the ink is locked in and dried, usually with UV, and it's dried and baked into the paper. So it's usually a more higher quality product, but they usually reserve that for matte and glossy paper stock, because if you don't, like, you can't do cold set with a glossy because it'll smear everywhere. Like it'll already get on your fingers a little bit with a cold set newsprint, but if you do cold set glossy, that thing's just like just wipe it right off because it never actually goes into the paper. So it'll get destroyed even as it's just sitting there, and you'll get impressions. They'll offset onto each other, the pages. So that'll be a heat set usually, and that's more of an expensive process. But those printers can hold and contain the thinner paper stocks. But the thing with the newsprint, it was a pure selfish thing, and then it really, I figured we'll do a little bit of this. I'll say that we did it, and then we'll go back to what we were doing, and just kind of release some of the graphic novels. We'll release them and break them up as single issues with new covers and things like that. And I figured that would be about it. And it wasn't about it because people really loved it, and they responded to it because they were missing it as well.
That's awesome. I just love that you've like stuck to your guns and like because that's one of the things I'm admittedly stubborn too. Anyone who knows me knows that, and it's like trying the way you've stuck to your guns. Like, nope, I think comics should be this way. Even when everyone in the industry was telling you no, you're like, no, I want to own it, and you've made a business out of it. And it seems like you really just stick to doing what you want. And I'm really excited to read your stuff, especially for that reason. I'm especially excited to read King Cryptid. I know. So
Thank
where
you.
can I find that on here? I wanted to ask you about
Okay,
that.
yeah. So if you go to, you could either go to where it says, I believe it says like current series or current title, something like that, and so you
Yeah,
can find King Cryptid there. And then we also have a crowdfunding tab where you can find all of our
is that right
campaigns.
here, or is that a different one?
But that's on the King Cryptid page. It's all in one for the campaign for 5 to 9, and you can also get anything else King Cryptid related to when you scroll to the bottom of it.
Here.
Because yeah, so issues 1 to 4 are out right now. So those are like bundles that you could get on this campaign. But if you scroll down, you can see like the single issues, and you could purchase them either all together, or you could purchase them individually if you'd like. But 1 to 4 are out right now, and people can get those, and then pick up 5 to 9 later if they want, or they can get them all in one shot. And we even have an option where you can pay a little bit extra in shipping, and then you get the stuff that's in stock shipped to you within 1 to 2 weeks, and you get the other stuff shipped later on when it's available. But it's up to people however they choose to do that.
So the fastest way to get King Cryptid is the whole series is by finding it on here or going to Indiegogo
I
or
would say the fastest way is here.
okay, awesome.
Because yeah, so if you get 1 through 4, you'll get those issues out very soon. If you got like 1 through 9 as a catch-up tier on Indiegogo, then those will ship when 5 through 9 are done, and that'll ship like around June, July.
And is the Indiegogo still there
Yep,
for
the
that?
Indiegogo is still active and up and running. It's in
Oh, let me
demand right
find it.
now. And even the campaign total of 924 backers with 33,062, that's combined between what's raised on the Alterna site and what's raised on the Indiegogo.
That's awesome. That's so. I'm curious, what made you? So with the crowd fund, do you make more on crowd funds or on your website typically?
Typically we do better through the site because the site is so extensive. There's like 500 almost anyway, 500 items on the site. So and that's available year round. And then whatever goes on the crowdfunding later on goes and is added to the site. So will people when people even back something that we have on our site, they'll pick up other items a lot of the time too as they're looking around. But the crowdfunders, it's interesting because the ones that I've done for King Cryptid have done really well, and I'm really appreciative and supportive of that. But we're really trying to get the other books up in terms of their awareness and in terms of what they're bringing in too. But again, it's difficult because it's everybody else's books on there. Generally, I have the King Cryptid campaign. I'm trying to focus so that we can now have creators doing their own kind of King Cryptid campaign where it's specifically just for their title. But some creators are acclimated to that, some are not. So it gets really difficult in terms of trying to maximize what they're doing. And then in terms of promoting it and marketing it, that's a whole different thing too. But yeah, so unfortunately, there's no easy answer for that. But
I noticed.
in terms of King Cryptid, that's my baby, a 7'2", 400-pound baby. So I'm more than happy to talk about this with pretty much anybody, anytime. And I've loved this kind of topic for just as long as I've loved comics, if not slightly longer. The paranormal, the supernatural, the unknown, the unexplained, all of that stuff has always fascinated me. Even when I was a kid, I was like the weird little kid taking out like Time Life books from the school library as opposed to getting like, whatever the kids were reading then. I'm sure I got a weird like look or two from the librarian at the time. But I always be taking out like UFO books and books about like the pyramids and Bigfoot and Loch Ness monster and whatever else. So this is kind of like me bringing everything I love about everything all together into one series, and it's a nice monster mystery, adventure, horror, sci-fi type series.
That's awesome. I was wondering, I was about to say, well, why did it take so long for you to do cryptids? But then I'm realizing how many interests I have and how long just outside of superheroes. And I'm like, well, you can't get to everything right away, but it sounds really cool. Do you have a favorite cryptid? Because I'm into this stuff too. I'm super into it. And I'm sorry
Man,
we're getting into it too so late.
no, it's fine. As far as cryptids go, man, I guess I'd have to say the Wendigo.
Oh, really? That's a great one.
Yeah, I love that one. And there's multiple versions of that, depending upon which American Indian tribe you're talking to.
Yeah, like the Chinook is kind of
But
like the
yeah, the
Wendigo,
Chinook
right?
is like that.
I
Yeah.
was talking to Graham about that. I was asking him, I was like, what's the difference between a Chinook and a Wendigo? And he was like, it depends on the tribe.
Yep, depends on the tribe, and there's all kinds of fascinating things with the cryptids too, because there's cultures across the world that never could have really had any communication with each other, and they have very similar
Similar.
cryptids and stories and mythology and whatever, and I find that's fascinating as well. But yeah, as far as the comic goes, the biggest reason that I am doing this at this point in time now instead of like let's say years ago was because I wanted to tell an ongoing series, episodic, that was always going to be growing in number. It wasn't going to be a miniseries because we did miniseries format at Alterna when we were Diamond because it was a sales tool. Because Diamond was flat out like, look, you're better off breaking these up into volumized series so you have another number one to put out there. Because otherwise it's going to just be canceled by issue 5 or 6 because that's basically how it goes. And I mean, they were right, but it was like a begrudging thing. So I had to kind of keep an idea like this on the back burner. I didn't have a specific idea for King Cryptid, but I knew I wanted to tell like a monster centric ongoing series. The way if I did something, if I had the time, I knew it would be that. focusing on one character and their journeys, their adventures, whatever it may be. And every episode, every issue would be treated like a complete story, and there would be an overarching continuity. So they'd all be still connected, but every time with the issue, the reader would get a full, complete story. It wouldn't have this decompressed quality. It would feel more like a classic comic book, like the
I
stuff that
love
I
that.
grew up loving. So that's what King Cryptid is now. But I couldn't have done this if we were still in the diamond system. I couldn't have done this if this was 5 or 6 years ago. This is being done exactly when when it could be done and when it should be done, and that's right now. So I have a lot of issues planned for this series. 5 to 9 are in production right now. We're going to launch a campaign for 10 to 13 in September. Every September is going to be a King Cryptid campaign for about 4 issues, and we'll keep doing that. And my goal is within 2, maybe 3 years to do 2 King Cryptid campaigns a year and do either 8 to 10 issues or so a year. So 4 or 5 per campaign.
I love that. I want to see it take off, man. I mean, I love cryptids. I love this stuff. So you're doing it like episodic, but I imagine it like takes place, in a certain order. You don't do story arcs so much as each issue is its own.
Yeah, so I was going to do a story arc for 10 to 12 and do 10, 11, and 12 and do a 3-parter. And then I decided I'll just make 10 a king-sized issue. So it's going to be a bigger issue with the amount of what would have been in 3 issues. So it'll be like 56 or so pages of story in issue 10. It'll be a nice king-sized issue, which is cool because I think, I love that milestone factor too. I know 10's not a huge milestone, but it is for something like this, especially for an independent. And I can't wait till we get to like issue 25, issue 50, issue 100. But instead of having these story arcs with multiple issues, we'll just have a bigger issue. And that'll allow me too, because the thing with this is it's been so much fun having being able to have a lot of characters and do world building, character building in an organic way, and have a new story for the readers with every issue, as opposed to like, let's say issue 1. I could have made that a 4-parter. It doesn't need to be a 4-parter, but I could have done it. But then I wouldn't have had those 3 other issues that would have had new characters, new developments, all these different things that really help progress that series along. Those would have had to wait. So if everything was like a 4-parter, imagine, man, it would take 16 issues to tell what I did in 4 issues, and there's no need for it. The pacing is tight, and you get the characters in there. You get more of the world. You get more understanding of who King Cryptid is and the world around him. He's in the New England region for now, but he's going to be getting outside of that, and so the world on this series is really going to start to expand, and the character is 500 something years old. So he's been around a while. So we're going to even have like flashback issues and all kinds of other things like that take place in different points in time and different places as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to backing this and reading this. I think that I mean, Wendigo is a great choice. Do you just have a list of cryptids you want to get through?
That's the fun thing about this is that I get inspired by cryptids, but I'm not using a lot of them directly.
Oh, really?
So
No
yeah,
Jersey
so
Devil?
no. So like some of them will be either mentioned, like Mothman's mentioned in issue 1,
Mm,
but the Behemoth is not Mothman. Behemoth is basically a human being that got his DNA altered with the DNA of the Mothman. So he was
gotcha.
experimented on. Because there's an agency within King Cryptid called the New England Cryptid Research Organization, and they're a government front. They're a front of a front for another front. So the whole thing is like a multi-layer cover-up. And the thing with Necro, which is what that acronym comes out to, they've been around for a very long time in very different ways. And they do a lot of experimentation on people, both being condoned and not condoned by various groups and organizations. But the New England Cryptid Research Organization has a nice front of just being an organization that is researching potential sightings and whereabouts of cryptids. But their motives are far more nefarious than that. So King Cryptid is kind of up against them, whether he realizes it or not. A lot of the stuff goes back to them, and eventually he will realize that. But right now, he's just getting a feeling that things are not going right. Like things are very strange, and that's saying a lot because he's seen a lot over the years, but he's seeing too much too fast in terms of how bad things are getting and how odd and unusual the occurrences are. And a lot of it's happening right underneath his nose. So when he discovers it, which he does throughout the course of issue 5 to 9, which are the ones currently being funded and created right now, by the end of issue 9, there's things that happen in that issue particularly where he really gets his world rocked by just how bad things are, and this organization is horrible. So you got to find out exactly what revelation occurs that he realizes that, and pick up the issues.
Yeah, I'm really excited. My camera just totally start finishing up stuff. Yeah.
See, they don't like us talking about this stuff.
This is what I mean. They're coming at me. I'm from New Jersey. The Jersey Devil is pretty south of me, but maybe it's catching on to me. Mothman, by the way, is my favorite cryptid so far.
Okay.
It's weird. I feel like part of me almost wishes I heard more of the Jersey Devil. I did hear about him around a campfire, which is perfect. But I don't know. Jersey Devil, I feel like I didn't. It's a great story. It's one of the best lore bits. I've been I don't know. Are you subscribed? Do you follow Wendigoon at all on YouTube?
No, I don't.
Oh, you probably love him. He's been doing this list going through cryptids lately. He's on like part 4, and I love it. Awesome.
I'll have to check it out. You said Wendigoon?
Yes, it's
I'll have to
Wendigo.
check it out.
But and yeah, he's great. He does all this kinds of stuff. Finishing off strong with no camera. Well, regardless, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great show. I'm gonna probably switch to at least finish with the camera. I always have a backup because I forget to charge. Anyway, this has been great. Honestly, you're just a wealth of knowledge, and it's like hearing. Honestly, the thing about it too is I don't have to be, even ask that many questions because there's just so much. I mean, I've learned so much.
That's a nice way of saying, Pete, you don't just want to shut the hell up.
No.
Speaking of which, though, are there any questions we missed in the chat? I don't want to miss any questions here from everybody that came and participated. And thank you guys, too, for being here.
Of course. Yeah, let's everyone in the chat, let me make sure there were questions. Hold on, let me go ahead and highlight. I'm sorry, I was so enthralled, just like taking mental notes. I'm like, okay, the industry did it. Oh, nope, here's something else. And so because of that, let's see, everyone in the chat, if you guys had any questions that I didn't star. I know Brian Blevins, he gave me crap for not answering questions, and I starred that, but not the question. That was a good job. Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone has any questions, ask them. But I think we got to like all the big ones. I know Michael asked a question about your distribution model, but I think otherwise, yeah, I think we got to everything. If not, that was my failure as a host. And I'm looking for question marks. Pete, did you ever have an IP come through Alterna that you were like, man, I would totally buy this IP if it were available? If so, ever act on it? There we go.
No and no. And maybe I would feel differently if I wasn't a creator as well. But I never felt like, I want to buy this. I've had people just flat out give them to me because they were like, I made the comic and I just don't want to make comics anymore. You want the IP? And I was like, okay, we'll take it. But it's just kind of like, only because I figured, okay, well, we'll just let it live on. But I didn't go in there and then start making more stories or making merchandise or something off of it, because it just, to me, it's one of those things where if the person involved no longer cares, I don't need to attach myself to that in that capacity. It doesn't motivate me. I get motivated by people who really care about what they're doing. If there's someone who, and it's happened multiple times over the years, because I've published a lot of people, But if there's someone that's putting their book through and they just don't really care, they're like very lackadaisical, kind of like a lump on a log, and it's really difficult to get motivated when that person is like that because it's not your thing, it's theirs.
Right.
But if they're really excited, if they're really driven, if they really care about it, I get pumped up by that. And conversely as well, if someone is like that, if someone is like, I don't really care, and I really, really try my best to make them care, and I devote a lot of time and attention and energy to them, that's a lot of time and attention and energy I'm devoting to them and not the people who do care. So what happens is that even if I raise them to a mediocre level of caring, I'm then losing the people that
Energy.
really care, and they could be like, put on the rocket boosters and go and launch them off. So and I've done that over the years, and I've always regretted it. So the past couple of years I've been like, look, if they don't care, that's it. They can, go do this on your own, go find another publisher, whatever it may be, that maybe they'll take care of everything for you. But that's not my mindset. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to drag someone across a finish line and run the race for them. I'm here to help them. I'm here to cheer them on. I'm here to guide them. I'm here to do everything I can possibly do to boost what they already have. But if they don't already have it, they need to find it and then maybe come back to me. But yeah,
And
people really need to be their own motivator.
and do you sell do submissions still or no?
No, we've got
That's
submissions
what I,
closed down at this
that's
point.
what I thought because I do remember when I first was going. I'll be on. I was looking at your website, um, and I had actually considered it, and then I guess I took too long, and I was like, well, never mind that. But I remember it came out. Is it came out on Wednesday? Was you
That's
right?
still, yeah, and that's still up and running. So we'll still take short story submissions for that between 1 to 10 pages. But
Hmm.
as far as series submissions go, we've got that closed down. I'm seeing, well, I did see the biggest motivation for it was the fact that I saw so many people coming in that were using all of this as like a stepping stone for like a Hollywood kind of thing. They would lead with
Oh,
that, like this will go great if we pitch this to this producer or that thing and that one. And I'm like, man, you guys are trying so hard to impress producers. Why don't you try hard to impress the reader? How about
yeah.
that? Let me get a pitch going with that about how much the readers would love this. How much do you think this story would really resonate with people? And I wasn't seeing a lot of that. And then I was also seeing a lot of people that were just rushing to do this. Like they would even write, this is the first time I've ever drawn anything, let alone create a comic. And I'm thinking, like, why are you doing this then? The worst thing that can happen to you is that it actually does get picked up by someone to publish because you're going to make a horrible first impression. You're going to be up against all kinds of different things you're not even aware of in terms of the scope of the business. Take your time, fall in love with creating, improve your craft, get used to writing and managing a project or drawing or whatever it is that you're doing. All of those aspects, get used to at least understanding what some of that is like before you just go, hey, I drew a page today, let me just go submit that to a publisher.
Hmm.
And I saw a lot of people really rushing to get stuff out there.
And I think again, it really comes to the whole instant gratification thing that is really, especially the internet. I think has really become a big problem. Is people really just they want to get results like that, and they're frustrated instead of building up and really enjoying them. And that's one of the things I've learned as the process is taking longer. It's like, okay, well, I can either complain about it or learn to enjoy it.
Yeah,
And
that's part of it. It's a big part of it. I'd say it's 99% of it, man. It is the process.
mhm.
And then the 1% of it is finishing it and going on to the next thing to do the next process. And the process is the completion of it, the marketing of it, the talking about it, letting people know about it. That's the process too. It's not just the getting the story together. It's everything. But yes, so now we're just mostly focusing on what we have in terms of the titles that are here, and we're going to be building on that. And then there's a couple other things I want to do years down the road, maybe 2 years or so. But I'll talk about that when the time comes.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited. Couple other questions: will Logman fight his nemesis, Cyber Logman? Okay. This is where you ask
I
for questions.
I don't know. I would sure. Sure, absolutely. SCP, what's SCP?
I don't know. What SCP? I feel like is that SCP. It seems like it looks like it's some kind of internet horror stuff. I feel like I've heard the term before, so probably sounds like something that would be up my alley if it's internet horror related. But thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. I'd love to have you on again. It's been fantastic.
Sure.
Everyone can follow you with Alterna Comics. I know you've got your own channel. It's everything I have is linked in the description. This has been
Thanks.
great. Do you have anything else you wanted to promote?
Everybody, go check out Alterna's current campaign. That's for 4 new comics. Get 4 new comics for $9. Blood
Oh,
Realm number 14 is on there. Horace H. Hoover number 3 of 5. Unit 44 number 9 and Unit 44 number 10. If
let me
you're
go ahead
into
and pull that up.
Yeah, it's on Indiegogo and it's on the Alterna site. You can go to alternacomics.com/funding. We've got 14 days left on that, and we've got 63 or 64% raised. So just a little bit more, and we'll eventually hit the goal. I think it's about $2,000 or so away from the goal. But yeah, again, the campaign is split between Indiegogo and alternacomics.com/funding.
Awesome. So you can fund through your own website too. That's really cool.
Yep. Yeah, and we just combine both totals, and that's the actual total. The goal is $7,000, and we've got about like 4,400 or 4,500, something like that, raised at this point.
And these are some new comics that are coming out that are self-contained, or are they?
Yeah, Unit 44 is a self-contained ongoing series. It's about the bumbling exploits of Area 51 agents. So they have different case files per issue. Horace H. Hoover is a miniseries. It's the last miniseries we'll publish at Alterna, so that's not necessarily self-contained. But then Blood Realm has multiple story arcs throughout the series. But Rob's getting good with each issue, or he's always been good with each issue, delivering you a complete story that will continue into the next story.
Oh, that's really cool. So there's tons of stuff over at Alterna. Definitely make sure to check it out. Wow. I'm sorry, we didn't even get to this stuff.
There's a lot to get to, man. I'll come back. Next week you got a show? I'll come back next week.
Next week I'm going to be having Michael Rushbrook, but I'll have you on again for sure. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming on, Pete. And I'd love to have you on again. Everyone make sure to follow Pete on everything. Stay tuned for this Sunday. I'm going to be having my weekly group show, Hard Chargers. And then next Tuesday, I'm going to be having Michael Rushbrook, who's the artist for Fiendish 2.5 on my show. So everyone stay tuned for that. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, and peace out. And